I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
Hello, this is part one of a two-part series, the state-sanctioned kidnapping of my child in 2011 by Larimer County, Colorado. We found that Larimer County was basically just charging us to have him go through this revolving door. The magistrate would make threats to my son, but would never follow through with them. So in effect, it just knocked the legs out from my wife and I trying to discipline my child. Eventually, in 2011, they held a hearing. Now, they didn't notify us of the hearing. They just went ahead and proceeded without any kind of service process being conducted. He had requested counsel for himself, but at this point in time, we had gone through a year long of having my legs knocked out from underneath me. I felt that it would be best if he spent maybe a week inside of juvenile detention or 2 weeks. They assigned him this attorney and, of course, assigned the fees to us. So here, my son's getting representation. Now he's got a guardian ad litem attorney. He's got a DHS attorney. He's got a state-appointed attorney and the district attorney himself all working to extract him from the home. I'm a fit parent. My son was doing delinquent things, not suffering from any kind of illness. They twisted the law and bent it in order to get him into this program so they could receive benefits from the federal Medicaid program. She says that she spoke with the DHS worker and they didn't think it was necessarily, or the DHS was necessarily opposing having him placed into residential treatment. In fact, the DHS attorney said, no, Ms. Blanco just got the paperwork and she's got it opposite of that. DHS was looking at detaining him. They couldn't make heads or tails out of if there was any kind of actual problem. The only thing that was rejecting this placement into this Remington house is that we didn't want it. Because we found that him going through this system where half of the side was for detention, the other half was for residential treatment of juvenile children, all intermingled together. They weren't separated at all. They came in at the same time. And we didn't want him in that system because he was finding more and more people to run away with and to get into trouble with. Blanco went on to say, I don't know if it's their position today. Again, she advocated for there's a bed available at the Remington house. And she states that she didn't feel comfortable with the child continuing to be detained for months at a time to figure out whether or not they could give him treatment. Well, first off, he wasn't in there months at a time. Second, no, you can't give him treatment. I'm the fit parent. If you would have asked me, I would have taken him in for an evaluation. You guys, for one, didn't have an evaluation conducted. For two, didn't have any consent for it. For three, held these proceedings without me being notified. She then goes on and states, I don't think that would be in his best interest. And we're going to get into best interest here in a little while. She goes on to say, I don't know if the court would consider placing him or not. I wish the caseworker was actually here today. So the guardian ad litem is proceeding, and the caseworker for DHS isn't even in court. And she didn't even come to court the subsequent hearing either. Here, Manning is saying that they've reached an agreement with the district attorney. So here the district attorney is contracting with my minor child for a plea agreement that Remington House specifically would be a condition of the plea agreement. The court says, okay. It goes on, and they say, we want to see how he'll do over at Remington House in treatment. So basically they're, going for a fishing expedition, seeing if they can find anything wrong with him. And then the court says, well, wait, we don't have his parents here. So Blanco goes on to say as well, my understanding is DHS caseworker who wasn't there in court tried to contact them by phone, but they didn't return the phone calls. That's not civil procedure for due process and service. She then goes on to start to speak on our behalf. I know their position would be that they would prefer to have him committed. If the court feels comfortable to continue forward, he would be placed in DHS custody today. So how do we go from juvenile delinquent behavior, where we're saying, look, if you guys want to keep arresting him and keep charging us $150 a whack, and then knock the legs out from us, then put him in detention. Somehow they turned that around to, well, we'll just take custody away from the parents. Of course, in a hearing where we're not present. The court asked, why would we delay sentencing? Where the DHS attorney says, I'm not trying to hide the ball on this particular one. DHS goes on to say, the department had contacted me and we went through sort of the options. They looked at whether or not placement would be appropriate in this case. And to be honest, they didn't have a lot of information. Now I find that amazing because we had been through the system with my son for a year. So what information did you need? He was getting into trouble. He was being a juvenile delinquent, but you wanted to treat him instead. Initially, they looked at it and thought, well, a lot of this looks like delinquency. Seems to be criminal behavior. We're not quite sure of any kind of mental health issues or substance issues that can be addressed. So we don't really have the ability to make a recommendation for sentencing or placement at this point. If the court wants to place him at Remington House for TRCCF placement, we don't have an objection to that. Once they can get some sort of information, if he's successful, that would be fantastic. But if he's not, at least we'll be able to come back to the court at sentencing and be able to give the court a rational recommendation rather than just making one up, which is exactly what they did. The court says, okay, I think we need to get it over with. I'm inclined. I mean, if he screws up at Remington House, now this is the magistrate saying this. Believe me, the parents and everybody else is going to be screaming. So the court is acknowledging that he's going to Remington House. The concern I have about it is that the agreement between the juvenile and the district attorney is that he gets out of JSAP, but I kind of have to get him there and the placement done. Meaning, I kind of have to take the custody away from the parents who aren't in this hearing. There is a deal between the juvenile and the district attorney. See what I'm saying? Then A-Rod comes along and says, I don't disagree with any of that. I'm just, of course, spinning through my head the whole 212 issue on making the findings. And if DHS in a couple of weeks tells me they have a problem with the placement, what do I do with that? Well, you do have a problem with the placement there, A-Rod. It was ordered illegally. You didn't have any consent from me. You didn't have a doctor's approval or any kind of recommendation. I'm just trying to avoid more complicated issues down the road. And the court says, Ms. Blanco, do you think he understands what he's doing today? Your Honor, I've advised him previously, and yes, today he seems to understand what he is doing as well. What the hell are you doing, Blanco, giving instructions to my child? I'm a fit parent. You don't have any right to do that. You believe that this plea agreement with placement in TRCCF, i.e. Remington House, is in the best interest. Absolutely. That's what she says. This is where I stop. She thinks that it's in the best interest. She placed them in the care with DHS, who in turn left my son alone with his mother, where there was a California no contact order because she had kidnapped him in 2001. It states specifically, no visitation until defendant enrolls and attends a 52-week program. This was after 10 years of her not seeing her child and not completing any classes. The court decides they will order his placement in TRCCF, but will not designate the placement. So we've had this discussion this whole time about Remington House. We're not there. And why is he now ordering this that we're not going to specify where he's going to go to? The court turns around and says this to my son. Your parents wrote the court and they are fed up with you. And that's putting it in a polite way. You're going to have to work really hard at Remington House. Remington House? Wait a minute. We're not designating placement, Magistrate Spangler. To control your behavior. Control his behavior? He was skipping classes and hanging out with a bunch of juvenile delinquents. You're going to have to do a heck of a sell job on your parents. So what are you instructing my son to do? get well. He's not in treatment, really, because it's delinquency. But he's going to sell us. So, what, a con job? Kind of like what you're running on the people? Yeah, that's what I figured. Because, someday you're going to, we don't usually emancipate kids out of the Remington house. So he said the Remington house twice, where we're not going to designate placement. I don't know the facts. That's straight from the court. I don't know the facts. You're damn right you don't know the facts, Magistrate Spangler. Neither did the guardian ad litem, DHS, or anybody else. They didn't consult with the parents. You held this hearing without us being there, and you broke the law to violate the federal Medicaid program. You're going to have to get your stuff together there and quickly. What, for that cell job? Is that what that's for? I'm sure it is. This is a fraud. It's state-sanctioned kidnapping. You had no right to take my child, and you had no right to bill the federal taxpayers. Had this been ordered legally, and had there been an evaluation by a doctor, my insurance, my personal insurance that I have as a fit parent, would have covered 95% of the cost of care for legitimate treatment. You were billing me $18,000 a month. Or should I say, you were billing that to the US taxpayers. So what we have here is an organized crime syndicate running out of Larimer County. And there's much more to this story. We're going to get into the second part. Because once I found out that they took my child, I raised hell. All for them to turn around and apologize and to do the same thing over again.